That's right. I actually owned the 5-star hotel where my husband, decided to take his mistress for their little romantic getaway. Can you even begin to imagine the look on his face? I'm talking about a man who prides himself on being unflappable. A man who never loses his cool, turning absolutely a statue frozen mid-breath, clutching the hand of a woman who was definitely not me, as his jaw literally dropped to the floor because his estranged wife, the one he thought was clueless and quietly fading into the background, was standing right there, framed by the opulent lobby of Fire's my new flagship property. He thought he was being clever, discreet, and untouchable, but I had built the very ground he was standing on, the gilded cage of his own undoing. It was a moment of pure, cinematic justice, and honestly, the sheer, unadulterated terror in his eyes was a sight I'll take with me to my grave. So, tell me, was I wrong for letting the entire thing play out exactly as it did, for not saying a single word until I was good and ready to deliver the final, devastating blow? Would you have stood there, silent and serene, and watched your cheater realize he'd walked straight into a trap that you had meticulously, unknowingly laid for him years ago? The full story, the real story, begins so much earlier, long before the sleek marble floors and the ridiculously expensive chandeliers of The Sovereign became my personal stage for revenge. John and I had been together for 18 years, married for 15. We were the classic power couple. He was a successful corporate lawyer, all sharp suits and even sharper wit, and I was the driven, quietly ambitious woman who built a successful interior design and luxury property development firm from the ground up. We were a unit, or so I thought. We had this unspoken agreement: he handled the legal world, the high-stakes mergers and acquisitions, and I built the beautiful physical world around us. The homes, the offices, and eventually, the hotels. We were wealthy, comfortable, and to the outside world, completely in love. Our marriage wasn't the kind with grand, sweeping gestures, but it was solid, built on mutual respect and shared goals. Or so I believed. My focus had been entirely on my business for the last decade. My company, Aura Developments, had just landed its biggest deal to date, the complete overhaul and relaunch of a historic, yet slightly faded, hotel in the city's most prime location. This was my baby, my magnum opus, a project that consumed my life for 2 solid years. I was in the office from dawn until long past midnight, pouring every ounce of my creativity, my drive, and frankly, my personal life, into making the Sovereign the most luxurious, exclusive, and talked about 5-star destination in the entire city. John was supportive, or at least, that's how he framed his absence. He'd say things like, "Go get 'em, babe, I'll hold down the fort," or, "Your passion is incredible, but don't forget to breathe." Now, I see that his holding down the fort simply meant he had plenty of uninterrupted time to build his own little world of deceit. I was too busy laying Italian tile and commissioning custom art to notice the subtle shift. The phone always face down, the sudden need for late-night strategy sessions with colleagues I'd never met, the vague explanations for weekends away. Looking back, the signs were a flashing neon nightmare, but I was wearing blinders made of blueprints and budgets. The crack in our perfect facade finally appeared, not with a bang, but with a quiet, insidious ping. I was still running on 2 hours of sleep, reviewing the final details for the hotel's soft opening, literally the week before, when my phone buzzed with an anonymous text. It wasn't a burner phone, just a random number I didn't recognize. The message was simply a photo. A grainy, slightly distant shot of John, in a casual but expensive jacket I had bought him, holding hands with a much younger woman. They were laughing, exiting a cab outside a theater. The location was clearly tagged a neighborhood I knew had no business being in, not for work, not for anything. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was a cold, sinking confusion. No, that's not John, but it was. The set of his shoulders, the way he tilted his head when he was amused, it was unmistakably him. I stared at that picture for what felt like an eternity, the world tilting slightly on its axis. The woman, whom I would later come to know as Chloe, was the classic cliché: young, blonde, vibrant, and wearing a coat that looked suspiciously like a slightly less expensive version of one I owned. I didn't confront him immediately. My business instincts kicked in. I went into research mode. I hired a private investigator the next day, a discreet former police officer named Mike who specialized in corporate and matrimonial surveillance. I told him I needed to know everything, no gaps, no sugarcoating. I didn't want to act on an assumption, I needed undeniable proof. What Mike uncovered over the next few weeks was a carefully constructed second life. Not a fling, not a drunken mistake, but a full-blown relationship that had been going on for over a year. Dinners, weekends away, small gifts, and endless, sickening texts. The sheer volume of evidence was suffocating. I learned that John had been telling Chloe that I was a cold, career-obsessed woman who had emotionally checked out of the marriage years ago. A narrative he was clearly constructing to justify his actions. The most damning evidence, the piece that twisted the knife and started to fuel a fire I didn't know I possessed, was an exchange where he promised Chloe a truly spectacular, unforgettable weekend to celebrate their upcoming anniversary. Their newest, most exclusive luxury hotel. He texted her, "Only the best for my girl. I hear the new Sovereign is the place to be. They're having a private soft launch before the official opening. And I know the guy handles their corporate accounts." My blood ran colder than the ice sculptures I had commissioned for the lobby. The Sovereign. My Sovereign. The soft opening was precisely what it sounded like, an exclusive, by invitation only weekend for profile business partners, investors, and the city's elite, designed to test the staff and services before the grand public launch. I was supposed to be the discreet, behind-the-scenes owner, the woman who designed the dream. But when I read that text, a new, far more delicious role instantly came into focus. John, in his arrogance, had clearly wangled an invitation through a contact in my company's legal department. A department I now realized was utterly unaware of my personal life and his private transgressions. He thought he was scoring a huge point with his mistress by securing a reservation at the most exclusive place in town. He was walking straight into the spider's web, and the spider was me. It was too perfect, too serendipitous to ignore. My heart pounded not with hurt anymore, but with a terrifying, exhilarating rush of adrenaline. I immediately called my operations manager, a man who knows better than to question my sudden, intense directives. I told him I was changing the entire soft launch protocol. From this moment forward, I am not just the owner and developer. I instructed him. I am going to be the face of the relaunch. I want my name and title, owner and president of Aura Developments, prominently displayed on every piece of promotional material, and I want to personally greet every single guest checking in this weekend. He looked at me like I had grown a second head, but he knows I always get what I want. I had the staff on high alert. I chose my outfit for the confrontation with the meticulous care of a general planning a military campaign, a sharp, elegant ivory suit, impeccably tailored, with a necklace that had cost him a small fortune years ago. I wanted to look like the absolute personification of success and icy, untouchable control. The stage was set. The soft launch weekend began. The energy was palpable, the hotel absolutely humming with a carefully orchestrated sense of exclusive luxury. My role was simple. I was seated at a custom-designed, elevated reception desk, greeting the most high-profile guests, shaking hands, making small talk, and radiating the calm, assured confidence of a woman in complete command. It was Friday night. The first wave of guests had checked in smoothly. My stomach was a knot of anticipation. I was performing, and I knew I was giving the performance of a lifetime. Then, the double doors swished open, and there he was, John, and Chloe. They looked happy. Disgustingly, sickeningly happy. Chloe was wearing one of those clingy little cocktail dresses, clutching his arm, her head tilted back in a way that signaled absolute, trusting adoration. John was beaming, looking proud, like he was introducing her to a secret, wonderful world. He walked right up to the general check-in desk, not yet noticing the separate elevated greeting area I occupied. My heart was thumping against my ribs, but my hands were steady, folded calmly on the desk. The check-in attendant, a brilliant young woman named Sarah, who was completely in the loop about the say who and why of this particular moment, followed my silent instructions perfectly. She glanced at the screen, feigned a small moment of confusion, and then, her voice carrying just enough to cut through the low background hum of the lobby, she said, "Oh, Mr. John. Your reservation is noted. But for this weekend's special soft launch, all executive guests are being personally welcomed by the owner. Please write." The gesture directly to me. John, still oblivious, started to turn, a pleasant, slightly impatient smile on his face. Chloe's gaze was already drifting over to me, and I saw her eyes widen a fraction. Then John turned fully. His smile evaporated. It wasn't a slow realization, it was a physical blow. His face went through 5 distinct stages in a second: pleasant expectation, dawning recognition, blinding panic, and finally utter, complete horror. He stopped dead. His hand, which had been resting confidently on Chloe's lower back, clenched slightly, and I saw his knuckles turn white. He couldn't look away from me. I, on the other hand, just gave him a slow, incredibly gracious, and entirely professional smile. The kind you give a valued client, not the husband trained you for 2 years. Chloe, seeing the bizarre, immediate halt, followed his gaze. She saw me. The impeccable woman in the expensive suit, behind the beautiful custom desk, wearing the air of ultimate authority. The words owner and president were discreetly engraved on a small, bronze plaque right next to my hand. She looked from me to John, who was now utterly silent, completely incapable of movement or speech, his eyes wide and vacant. The realization, the sheer impossible magnitude of what was happening, was starting to sink into her too. They had walked into a fantasy world, only to find the nightmare version of his wife was its queen. So that's the situation I was in. I had them completely exposed, utterly trapped in a gilded, 5-star mousetrap of my own design. I could have broken the silence right then and there. I could have screamed, made a scene, demanded they be thrown out. But that's what he probably expected, the loud, messy confrontation that would let him play the victim, or at least the aggressor. But I had something better. I had the power, the money and the stage. The silence, stretched taut over the polished marble, was my weapon. I had to make a choice: use the power to just destroy him right there, or use it to play the long game and keep my dignity intact while ensuring his absolute humiliation. Before I tell you what I did next, what final, chilling move I made, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have left them off with a whisper? Or would you have ensured the entire weekend was a living hell? What's the ultimate revenge move when you own the whole darn building? I held his gaze for a moment that felt like an yoon, my smile never faltering. It wasn't warm, it was surgical. I stood up slowly, deliberately, my posture radiating authority. My heels clicked softly on the marble as I walked around the desk, not toward him, but toward Sarah, the check-in attendant. I stood right next to her, glancing at the screen, and then back at John, who was still locked in his paralyzed state. I reached out a hand and took the keycard packet from Sarah. I spoke, not to John, but to Chloe, my voice perfectly modulated. Warm, welcoming, and utterly professional. Welcome to the Sovereign. It's a pleasure to have you here for our soft opening. Then, I turned my full attention to John, and this is where the real knife twist came in. I extended the key packet to him. John, I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion, like I was addressing a junior employee. I'm glad you could make it. I trust Mr. Harrison in legal was able to secure a satisfactory rate for you. Enjoy your stay in the US Executive Suite, room 1803's. I emphasized the room number. It was the best suite in the house, a spectacular over-the-top suite that I had personally designed. A space he clearly hadn't paid the standard rate for. I hadn't forgotten the text about getting a rate through a contact. I was acknowledging his deception, not just of me, but of the company, and letting him know that I knew exactly how he'd gotten his little luxury weekend. I didn't mention being his wife. I didn't mention cheating. I didn't scream or cry. I treated him like a regular guest, corporate acquaintance, but one who was already slightly beneath my notice. John finally found his voice, a strangled, barely audible whisper. Honey, what are you doing here? His eyes darted nervously to Chloe, then back to me, trying desperately to construct a lie, a defense, anything. I didn't answer the question. I simply tilted my head and gave a tiny dismissive shrug. I own it, John. I'm the owner. I thought that was clear, I said, my voice a casual statement of fact. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a few more high-profile guests to greet. Enjoy your weekend. And do let us anything at all we can do to make your stay more memorable. I let that word hang in the air. Memorable. I then turned my back on them, a perfectly straight line of ivory, and walked back to my desk to greet the next arriving couple with a bright, genuine smile. The aftermath was exquisite agony for him, and a strange, powerful catharsis for me. They checked in. They went up to us, room 1803, and I continued to be the gracious, omnipresent owner. I was at the gala reception that evening, the woman in the center of every conversation, the host everyone wanted to meet. John and Chloe were forced to attend. They had to. They were invited as high-profile guests, and to leave would have been to admit defeat and create an immediate, much-discussed scandal. They were like two ghosts at the feast. John couldn't get within 10 feet of me. Every time he tried approach, a member of my staff, following silent cues, would politely intercede, leading him away with a perfectly executed, Mr. John, Mrs. my last name, is tied up with the mayor right now, but she'd love to say hello later. Can I get you another drink? The entire weekend, I was the sun they orbited, the gravity they couldn't escape. I saw them at breakfast. John picking at his food, Chloe looking pale and tense. I walked past their table, pausing just long enough to tell the waiter, loud enough for them to hear. I hope everything is to your satisfaction in a suite 1803. If not, please, tell me personally. I designed that space, and I take all feedback to heart. I was everywhere. supervising the brunch, hosting the investors' meeting, and always radiating my success. Every waiter, every concierge, every bellhop, everyone on staff knew that the man in room 1803's was the owner's cheating husband, and they treated him with a cold, almost invisible, meticulous courtesy that was far more humiliating than any outright rudeness. They were being served by people who knew his secret, and his downfall was being staged right in front of them. One pristine, white-gloved service at a time. The whole weekend was a masterclass in psychological torture. They checked out early Sunday morning, not even waiting for brunch. I was, of course, present at the checkout desk, completing a final, symbolic farewell for the few remaining guests. John and Chloe came down, luggage and towed, two people absolutely defeated. He avoided my eyes. She didn't look at anyone. When the final bill was presented, a staggering amount, even at the discounted corporate rate he secured, John just shoved his credit card at the attendant, still not looking at me. As they turned to walk away, I said his name, just his first name, quietly, but with a force that made them both stop instantly. John. He turned slowly, his face with exhaustion and dread. We need to talk, he mumbled. Oh, we don't need to talk at all, I replied, standing up straight. It's all quite clear, isn't it? Everything you need to know about our future is written on your face right now. Enjoy the ride home. I'll have the papers drafted by the end of the week. And just a little thought, I added, stepping closer, leaning in just slightly so only he could hear the final, icy punch. Next time you decide to betray the woman who built your entire life, make sure she doesn't also own the luxury venue you choose to do it in. Now, get out of my hotel. I didn't even acknowledge Chloe's existence. I simply turned on my heel and walked back into the inner office. The divorce was swift, painless for me, and utterly devastating for him. His reputation took a hit when the story, in a highly sanitized but recognizable form, started circulating among the high-powered guests who had been at the soft launch. The word was that John had grossly abused his corporate connections for personal gain, and his client list dwindled. He lost his firm's biggest account, an account I conveniently acquired for my new in-house legal team. Chloe, seeing the man she thought was a powerful, untouchable figure crumble into a shell of himself, disappeared completely. She realized she hadn't been dating a hero, she'd been dating a colossal failure. The Sovereign opened officially 2 weeks later to rave reviews and massive bookings. It became my absolute pride and joy, a fortress of my independence. Looking back, I don't regret a single second of that weekend. I took back my power, my dignity, and frankly, I delivered the most satisfying, perfectly staged revenge a woman could ever dream of. The best part. I didn't even have to get angry. I just had to be successful. That's the real moral of the story. Don't get mad, get rich, and then buy the hotel where he takes his mistress. Like this video if you were on my side and think John got exactly what he deserved. Subscribe for more true stories of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate comebacks. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole messy situation in the comments section below. I want to know who you think was more shocked, John or Chloe. I'll see you all in the next story.